tauntingly. Evelyn swore. She loved her television shows. If she hadn't spent so much time listening to Joan go on about her errant husband, she would have been home half an hour ago, watching the drama in her comfy armchair, nightcap in hand. The loud techno beats went up a few more decibels, and Evelyn swore again. It wasn't even decent music. What was wrong with the Beatles, Frank Sinatra, or Elvis? She knew that dance music was all the rage, but to her ears there was no enjoyment to be had from listening to the hammer and clobber of a synthesizer. Evelyn felt her patience finally snap, and she stormed out of her flat across the hallway to 3A and knocked loudly on her neighbour's door. When nobody answered, she started banging, shouting every obscenity she could think of, releasing her frustration, tiredness and irritability with every thump of her fist. "Oi! Shut it! You're making more racket than them, you silly bitch!" Evelyn stopped abruptly and leant over the railing. Billy, who lived in the flat beneath hers, was standing in his doorway wearing only a pair of greying, saggy underpants. "For God's sake, Billy, will you put some bloody clothes on? As if I don't have enough to put up without you parading around in your undies," shouted Evelyn. Billy turned round and bent over, pulling down his pants. Evelyn rolled her eyes and ignored him. At the foot of the stairs, she saw a couple of druggies light up spliffs, and she turned away, silently counting to 10. She'd been clean for a number of years now, but it was still a struggle, especially when surrounded by it on a regular basis. She had begged the council to give her a flat in a more reputable postcode, but it didn't look like that was going to happen. Once a month she went to the council office to follow up, and every time the advisor, Alan, his name was, told her the request was in the system and he would be in touch if anything became available. Every single time. She wondered if Alan was as bored by the interaction as she was. He didn't even pretend to check the file anymore. Either way, she was pretty certain Alan didn't live on a rough council estate like Harrington. Giving her neighbour's door one last thump with her foot, she felt only slightly mollified when some of the paintwork fell off. Back inside her flat, she went into the kitchen and decided that the only way to drown out the noise was with another shot of vodka. Chapter 2. Angela. Angela squeezed herself onto the tube, trying not to breathe in the smell of sweat from the bodies pressed up against her. This wasn't where she wanted to be on the Friday night of the summer bank holiday weekend, but her parents had invited her specifically. In fact, she had been slightly intrigued as to what may have prompted the invitation for her to spend the long weekend with them. Angela tried not to think too much about the Astoria nightclub. It would have been a brilliant night out, and her friends had been talking about it for weeks. Angela wasn't too bothered about the drugs, but she did like the music. When you worked in a stressful industry like law, you needed a release. Besides, she thought, she worked hard, and she deserved a night out once every so often. Yet here she was, jammed on the tube on the way to her parents' home in Tetbury. It was a good 2-hour journey from her office in central London, and she was getting the 4:15 p.m. from Paddington, which had meant leaving work early. She couldn't remember the last time she'd been outside her law firm during working hours, other than to grab a sandwich to eat at her desk. Normally, she'd be ensconced in her cubicle working at least a 60-hour week, often going in on weekends as well. Escaping the stifling odour of the underground at Paddington, Angela got on the mainline train, happy to have found a seat, and took a few moments to straighten her new Jaeger suit. The eye-catching shade of green was perhaps a little too much for the corporate environment of King's solicitors, but it went fabulously with her dark hair, and she knew she pulled it off by the number of admiring glances she received. The tailored trousers and fitted jacket with shoulder pads were so flattering. Besides, she didn't want to blend in with all the other associates in the office, and this was just one way to be remembered by clients and the senior partners. Satisfied with her appearance, Angela pulled out some papers from her bag and began to work.